Krishna. Today we're going to start from the text 2 of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. I would like to dedicate this to His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj, to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Text 2. Projita Kaitavo Atra Paramo Nirmat Saranam Satam Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Unmulanam Śrīmad-Bhāgavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parer Ishvara Sadyo Hridi Avarudhyate Atra Kritibhi Shushrushuvis Tatkshanat. Synonyms: Dharma, religiosity; Projita, completely rejected; Kaitava, covered by fruitive intention; Atra, herein; Parama, the highest; Nirmatsaranam, of the 100% pure in heart; Satam, devotees; Vedyam, understandable; Vastavam, factual; Atra, herein; Vastu, substance; Shivadam, well-being; Tapatraya, threefold miseries; Unmulanam, causing uprooting of; Śrīmad, beautiful; Bhagavate, the Bhagavata Purana; Mahamuni, the great sage Vyasadeva; Krite, have; Kim, what is; Va, the need; Parai, others; Ishvara, the Supreme Lord; Sadhya, at once; Hridi, within the heart; Avarudhyate, becomes compact; Atra, herein; Kritibhi, by the pious men; Shushrushubi, by culture; Tatkshanat, without delay. Translation: completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Purport: religion includes 4 primary subjects, namely pious activities, economic development, satisfaction of the senses, and finally liberation from material bondage. Irreligious life is a barbarous condition. Indeed, human life begins when religion begins. Eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating are the 4 principles of animal life. These are common both to animals and to human beings. But religion is the extra function of the human being. Without religion, human life is no better than animal life. Therefore, in human society, there is some form of religion which aims at self-realization and which makes reference to man's eternal relationship with God. In the lower stages of human civilization, there is always competition to lord it over the material nature, or in other words, there is a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. Driven by such consciousness, man turns to religion. He thus performs pious activities or religious functions in order to gain something material. But if such material gains are obtainable in other ways, then so-called religion is neglected. This is the situation in modern civilization. Man is thriving economically, so at present he is not very interested in religion. Churches, mosques, or temples are now practically vacant. Men are more interested in factories, shops, and cinemas than in religious places, which were erected by their forefathers. This practically proves that religion is performed for some economic gains. Economic gains are needed for sense gratification. Often, when one is baffled in the pursuit of sense gratification, he takes to salvation and tries to become one with the Supreme Lord. Consequently, all these states are simply different types of sense gratification. In the Vedas, the above mentioned 4 activities are prescribed in the regulative way so that there will not be any undue competition for sense gratification. But Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is transcendental to all these sensory gratificatory activities. It is purely transcendental literature which can be understood only by the pure devotees of the Lord who are transcendental to competitive sense gratification. In the material world, there's keen competition between animal and animal, man and man, community and community, nation and nation. But the devotees of the Lord rise above such competitions. They do not compete with the materialists because they are on the path back to God as eternal and blissful. Such transcendentalists are non-envious and are pure in heart. In the material world, everyone is envious of everyone else, and therefore there is competition. But the transcendental devotees of the Lord are not only free from material envy, but are well-wishers to everyone, and they strive to establish a competitionless society with God in the center. The contemporary socialist conception of a competitionless society is artificial because in the socialist state, there is competition for the post of dictator. From the point of view of the Vedas or from the point of view of common human activities, sense gratification is the basis of material life. There are 3 paths mentioned in the Vedas. One involves fruitive activities to gain promotion to better planets. Another involves worshipping different demigods for promotion to the planets of the demigods. And another involves realizing the absolute truth and its impersonal feature and becoming one with him. The impersonal aspect of the absolute truth, the highest. Above the impersonal feature is the Paramatma feature, and above this is the personal feature of the absolute truth or Bhagavan. Srimad-Bhagavatam gives information about the absolute truth in his personal feature. It is higher than impersonalist literatures and higher than the Jnana Kanda division of the Vedas. It is even higher than the Karma Kanda division and even higher than the Upasana Kanda division because it recommends the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. In the Karma Kanda, there's competition to reach heavenly planets for better sense gratification, and there is similar competition in the Jnana Kanda and the Upasana Kanda. The Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is superior to all of these because it aims at the supreme truth, which is the substance or the root of all categories. From Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, one can come to know the substance as well as the categories. The substance is the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, and all emanations are relative forms of energy. Nothing is apart from the substance. At the same time, the energies are different from the substance. This conception is not contradictory. Srimad-Bhagavatam explicitly promulgates this simultaneously one and different philosophy of the Vedanta Sutra, which begins with the Janma-Dasya Sutra. This knowledge that the energy of the Lord is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord is an answer to the mental speculator's attempt to establish the energy as the absolute. When this knowledge is factually understood, one sees the conceptions of monism and dualism to be imperfect. This knowledge that the energy of the Lord is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord is an answer to the mental speculator's attempt to establish the energy as the absolute. When this knowledge is factually understood, one sees the conceptions of monism and dualism to be imperfect. development of this transcendental consciousness, grounded in the conception of simultaneously one and different, leads one immediately to the stage of freedom from the threefold miseries. The threefold miseries are those miseries which arise from the mind and body, those miseries inflicted by others, those miseries arising from natural catastrophes over which one has no control. Srimad-Bhagavatam begins with the surrender of the devotee onto the Supreme Person. The devotee is fully aware that he is one with the Absolute and at the same time in the eternal position of servant to the Absolute. In the material conception, one falsely thinks himself the Lord of all his service, and therefore he is always troubled by the threefold miseries of life. But as soon as one comes to know his real position as transcendental servant, he at once becomes free from all miseries. As long as a living entity is trying to master material nature, there's no possibility of his becoming servant of the Supreme. Service to the Lord is rendered in pure consciousness of one's spiritual identity. By service, one is immediately freed from material encumbrances. Over and above this, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a personal commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Sri Vyasadeva. It was written in the maturity of his spiritual life through the mercy of Narada. Sri Vyasa is the authorized incarnation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. Therefore, there's no question as to his authority. He is the author of all other Vedic literatures. Yet, he recommends the study of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam above all others. In other Puranas, there are different methods set forth by which one can worship the demigods. But in the Bhagavatam only, the Supreme Lord is mentioned. The Supreme Lord is the total body, and the demigods are the different parts of the body, of that body. Consequently, by worshipping the Supreme Lord, one does not need to worship the demigods. The Supreme Lord becomes fixed in the heart of the devotee immediately. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as the spotless Purana and distinguishes it from all other Puranas. The proper method for receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. A challenging attitude cannot help one realize this transcendental message. One particular word is used herein for proper guidance. This word is shushrushu. Anxious to hear this transcendental message. The desire to sincerely hear is the first qualification. Less fortunate persons are not at all interested in hearing this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. The process is simple, but the application is difficult. Unfortunate people find enough time to hear idle social and political conversations, but when invited to attend a meeting of devotees to hear Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they suddenly become reluctant. Sometimes professional readers of the Bhagavatam immediately plunge into the confidential topics of the pastimes of the Supreme. Into the confidential topics of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which they seemingly interpret as sex literature. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is meant to be heard from the beginning. Those who are fit to assimilate this work are mentioned in this shloka. One becomes qualified to hear Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam after many pious deeds. The intelligent person with thoughtful discretion can be assured by the great sage Vyasadeva that he can realize the Supreme Personality directly by hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam without undergoing the different stages of realization set forth in the Veda. Lifted immediately to the position of Paramahamsa simply by agreeing to receive this message. Text 3. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shuka mukhadamruta drava samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. Synonyms: Nigama, Vedic literatures; Kalpataro, the desire tree; Galitam, fully matured; Phalam, fruit; Shuka, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the original speaker of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam; Mukhat, from the lips of; Amrita, nectar; Drava, semi-solid and soft, and therefore easily swallowable; Samyutam, perfect in all respects; Pibata, to relish it; Bhagavatam, the book dealing in the science of the eternal relation with the Lord; Rasam, juice, that which is relishable; Alayam, until liberation, or even in a liberated condition; Muhu, always; Aho, oh; Rasika, those who are full in knowledge of mellows; Bhuvi, on the earth; Bhavuka, expert and thoughtful. Translation: O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad-Bhagavatam, the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Purport: in the two previous shlokas, it has been definitely proved that the Srimad-Bhagavatam is the sublime literature which surpasses all other Vedic scriptures due to its transcendental qualities. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge. In this shloka, it is stated that Srimad-Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literatures. In other words, it is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. Considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. With great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Vedas are compared to the desire tree because they contain all things knowable by man. They deal with mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization. The Vedas contain regulative principles of knowledge covering social, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, and metaphysical subject matter, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and soul together. Above and beyond all these are specific directions for spiritual realization. Regulative knowledge involves a gradual raising of the living entity to the spiritual platform. And the highest spiritual realization is knowledge that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes or rasas. Every living entity, beginning from Brahma, the first-born living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desires to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perceptions. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated: Raudra, anger; Adbhuta, wonder; Shringara, conjugal love; Hasya, comedy; Veera, chivalry; Daya, mercy; leadership; Sakya, fraternity; Bhayanaka, horror; Bibhatsa, shock; Shanta, neutrality; Vatsalya, parenthood. The sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily, such signs of love are manifested in adoration, service, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And when these five are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. When a man is, for example, when a man is in love with a woman, the rasa is called conjugal love. But when such love affairs are disturbed, there may be wonder, anger, shock, or even horror. Sometimes love affairs between two persons culminate in ghastly murder scenes. Such rasas are displayed between man and man and between animal and animal. There is no possibility of an exchange of rasa between a man and an animal or between a man and any other species of living beings within the material world. The rasas are exchanged between members of the same species. But as far as the spirit souls are concerned, they are one qualitatively with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spirit and the spiritual whole. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual exchange of rasa is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between living beings and the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is therefore described in the Shruti mantras, Vedic hymns, as the fountainhead of all rasas. When one associates with the Supreme Lord and exchanges one's constitutional rasa with the Lord, then the living being is actually happy. These Shruti mantras indicate that every living being has its constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. In the liberated condition only, this primary rasa is experienced in full. In the material existence, the rasa is experienced in the perverted form, which is temporary. And thus the rasas of the material world are exhibited in the material form of Raudra, anger, and so on. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are the basic principles of activities, the false representations of the original rasas, which are reflected in the material world. The learned scholar seeks to relish the real rasa in the spiritual form. In the beginning, he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the spirit whole without knowing of the different rasas. In this shloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad-Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source. It was brought by Narada Muni from the spiritual world and given to his disciple Sri Vyasadeva. The latter in turn delivered the message to his son Srila Shukadeva, and Srila Shukadeva Goswami delivered the message to Maharaja Parikshit just 7 days before the king's death. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from his very birth. He was liberated even in the womb of his mother, and he did not undergo any sort of spiritual training after his birth. At birth, no one is qualified, neither in the mundane nor in the spiritual sense. But Sri Shukadeva Goswami, due to his being a completely liberated person, situated in the transcendental position above the three material modes, he was attracted to this transcendental rasa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adored by liberated souls who sing Vedic hymns. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. Is of necessity, not impersonal, because it is only possible to carry on transcendental rasa with a person. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are narrated, and the narration is systematically depicted by Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Thus, the subject matter is appealing to all classes, including those who seek liberation and those who seek to become one with the Supreme Whole. In Sanskrit, the parrot is also known as shuka. When a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds, its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Shukadev Goswami, who is compared to the parrot not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. The subject matter is so presented to the lips of Srila Shukadev Goswami that any sincere listener that hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes which are distinct from the perverted taste of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka. Rather, it has come down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession, without change or disturbance. Foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplic succession commit great blunders by trying to understand the highest transcendental rasa dance without following the footsteps of Shukdev Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent enough to know the position of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by considering personalities like Shukdev Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of the Bhagavata school suggests that in the future also Srimad-Bhagavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Shukdev Goswami. A professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Shukdev Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing the lectures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of the literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding this grave subject. They usually plunge into the subject matter of the rasa dance, which is misunderstood by the foolish class of men. Some of them take this to be immoral, while others try to cover it up by their own stupid interpretations. They have no desire to follow in the footsteps of Sri Shukdev Goswami. Text 4. Naimishe nimisha kshetre rishaya shaunakadaya satram swargaya lokaya sahasra samamasata. Synonyms. Naimishe, in the forest known as Naimisharanya. Animisha kshetre, the spot which is especially a favorite of Vishnu, who does not close his eyelids. Rishaya, sages. Shaunaka Adaya, headed by the sage Shaunaka. Satram, sacrifice. Swargaya, the Lord who is glorified in heaven. Lokaya, and for the devotees who are always in touch with the Lord. Sahasra, 1000. Samam, years. Asata, performed. Translation. Once in a holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages, headed by the sage Shaunaka, assembled to perform a great sacrifice. Once in a holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages assembled to perform a great 1000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord and his devotees. Purport. The prelude of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam was spoken in the previous 3 shlokas. Now the main topic of this great literature is being presented. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, after its first recitation by Srila Shukdev Goswami, was repeated for the second time at Naimisharanya. In the Vayaviya Tantra, it is said that Brahma, the engineer of this particular universe, contemplated a great wheel which could enclose the universe. The hub of this great circle was fixed at a particular place known as Naimisharanya, which there is Naimisharanya. Similarly, There's another reference in the forest of Naimisharanya. Similarly, there's another reference to the forest of Naimisharanya in the Varaha Purana, where it is stated that by performance of sacrifice at this place, the strength of demoniac people is curtailed. Prefer Naimisharanya for such sacrificial performances. The devotees of Lord Vishnu offer all kinds of sacrifices for his pleasure. The devotees are always attached to the service of the Lord, whereas fallen souls are attached to the pleasures of material existence. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that anything performed in the material world for any reason other than for the pleasure of the Lord Vishnu causes further bondage for the performer. It is enjoined, therefore, that all acts must be performed sacrificially for the satisfaction of Vishnu and his devotees. This will bring everyone peace and prosperity. The great sages are always anxious to do good to the people in general. And as such, the sages headed by Shaunaka and others assemble at this holy place of Naimisharanya with a program of performing the great sages are always anxious to do good to the people in general, and as such, the sages headed by Shaunaka and others assembled at this holy place of Naimisharanya with a program of continuous chain of sacrificial ceremonies. Forgetful men do not know the right path for peace and prosperity. However, the sages know it well, and therefore, for the good of all men, they are always anxious to perform acts which may bring about peace in the world. They are sincere friends to all living entities. Under the risk of great personal inconvenience, they are always engaged in the service of the Lord for the good of all people. Lord Vishnu is just like a great tree, and all others, including the demigods, men, siddhas, charanas, vidyadharas, and other living entities, are like branches, twigs, and leaves of that tree. By pouring water on the root of the tree, all the parts of the tree are automatically nourished. Only those branches and leaves which are detached cannot be so satisfied. Detached branches and leaves dry up gradually despite all watering attempts. Similarly, human society, when it is detached from the personality of Godhead, like detached branches and leaves, is not capable of being watered, and one attempting to do so is simply wasting his energy and resources. The modern materialistic society is detached from its relation to the Supreme Lord, and all its plans, which are being made by atheistic leaders, are sure to be baffled at every step. Yet they in this age, the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord is the prescribed method for in this age, the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord is the prescribed method for waking up. The ways and means are most scientifically presented by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and intelligent persons may take advantage of his teachings in order to bring about real peace and prosperity. Srimad-Bhāgavatam is also presented for the same purpose, and this will be explained more specifically later in the text 5. Ta ekadatu munaya praturhyutahyutagnaya satkritam sutam ashinam paprachuridam adarat. They, the sages, ekada, one day, two, but munaya, sages, prata, morning, hyuta, burning, huta, agnaya, the sacrificial fire, satkritam, due respects, sutam, Sri Suta Goswami, ashinam, seated on, paprachu, made inquiries, idam, on this, as follows, adara, Translation. One day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Suta Goswami, the great sages made enquiries with great respect about the following matters. Purport. Morning is the best time to hold spiritual services. The great sages offered the speaker of the Bhagavatam an elevated seat of respect called the Vyasasana, or the seat of Sri Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva is the original spiritual preceptor for all men, and all other preceptors are considered to be his representatives. A representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Sri Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva impregnated the message of Bhagavatam onto Srila Shukadev Goswami, and Sri Suta Goswami heard it from him, Sri Shukadev Goswami. All bona fide representatives of Sri Vyasadeva in the chain of disciplines are to be understood to be Goswamis. These Goswamis restrain all the senses, and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. The Goswamis do not deliver lectures on the Bhagavatam capriciously. Rather, they execute their services most carefully, following the predecessors who deliver the spiritual message unbroken to them. Then, those who listen to the Bhagavatam may put questions to the speaker in order to elicit the clear meaning, but this should not be done in a challenging spirit. One must submit questions with a great regard for the speaker and the subject matter. This is also the way recommended in Bhagavad Gita. One must learn the transcendental subject by submissive oral reception from the right sources. Therefore, these sages address the speaker Suta Goswami with great respect. Text 6. Rishaya uchu tvaya kalu purnani setihasani chanugha akhyatani api adhitani dharma shastrani yani yuta. Rishaya, the sages, uchu, said, tvaya, by you, kalu, immediately, kalu, undoubtedly, Puranani, the supplements to the Vedas with illustrative narrations, iti asani, along with the histories, cha and anagha, free from all vices, akhyatani, explain, api, although, adhitani, well read, dharma shastrani, scriptures giving right directions to progressive life, yani, all this, uta, said. Translation. The sages said, respected Suta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all the scriptures famous for religious life, and in the Puranas and the histories as well. For you have gone through them under proper guidance and have also explained them. A Goswami or the bona fide representative of Sri Vyasadeva must be free from all kinds of vices. The four major vices of Kali Yuga are with women, animal slaughter, intoxication, speculative gambling of all sorts. A Goswami must be free from all these vices before he can dare sit on the Vyasasana. No one should be allowed to sit on the Vyasasana who is not spotless in character and who is not free from the above mentioned vices. But he is also not only should be freed from all such vices, but must also be well versed in all revealed scriptures or in the Vedas. The Puranas are also part of the Vedas, and histories like the Mahabharata or Ramayana are also part of the Vedas. The Acharya or the Goswami must be well acquainted with all these literatures. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. One can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures only by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravana and explaining is called Kirtana. The two processes of Shravana and Kirtana or of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain the subject. Text 7. Yani Veda Vidham Shreshto Adarayana Anyecha Munaya Suta Puravara Vido Vidu. Yani, all that Veda Vidam, scholars of the Vedas, Shreshta, senior most, Bhagavan, incarnation of Godhead, Badarayana, Vyasadeva, Anye, others, Cha and Munaya, the sages, Suta, O Suta Goswami, Paravara Vida, amongst the learned scholars, one who is conversant with physical and metaphysical knowledge, Vidhu, one who knows. Translation. Being the eldest learned Vedantist, O Suta Goswami, you are acquainted with the knowledge of Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Godhead, and you also know other sages who are fully versed in all kinds of physical and metaphysical knowledge. Purport. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a natural commentation of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a natural commentation on the Brahma Sutra or the Badarayani Vedanta Sutras. It is called natural because Vyasadeva is author of both the Vedanta Sutras and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, or the essence of all Vedic literatures. Besides Vyasadeva, there are other sages who are the authors of 6 different philosophical systems, namely Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Ashtavakra. Theism is explained completely in the Vedanta Sutra, whereas in other systems of philosophical speculations, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes. One can sit on the Vyasasana only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one can present fully the theistic views of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. Srila Suta Goswami was the proper teacher, and therefore the sages at Naimisharanya elevated him to the Vyasasana. Sri Vyasadeva is designated herein as the personality of Godhead because he is the authorized, empowered incarnation. Text 8. Vetatvam saumya tat sarvam tatvatas tad anugrahad bruya snigdhasya shishyasya guravo guhyam apyuta. Synonyms. Veta, you are well conversant. Tvam, your honor. Saumya, one who is pure and simple. Tat, though, sarvam, all. Tatvata, in fact. Tat, there. Anugrahat, by the favor of. Bruyu, will tell. Snigdhasya, of the one who is submissive. Shishyasya, of the disciple. Gurava, the spiritual masters. Guh, apiyuta, endowed with. Translation. And because you're submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle disciple. Therefore, you can tell us all that you have scientifically learned from them. Purport. The secret of success in spiritual life is in satisfying the spiritual master and thereby getting his sincere blessings. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakura has sung in his famous 8 stanzas on the spiritual master as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances onto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Only by his satisfaction can one please the personality of Godhead, and when he is dissatisfied, there's only havoc on the path of spiritual realization. It is essential, therefore, that a disciple be very much obedient and submissive to the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Suta Goswami fulfilled all these qualifications as a disciple, and therefore he was endowed with all favors by his learned and self-realized spiritual masters such as Srila Vyasadeva and others. The sages of Naimisharanya were confident that Srila Suta Goswami was bona fide. Therefore, they were anxious to hear from him. Text 9. Tatra tatran jasayusham shman tatra tatran jasayushman bhavata yad vinishitam pumsam ekantata shreyas tannahasham situm arhasi. Synonyms. Tatra, thereof. Tatra, thereof. Anjasa, made easy. Ayushman, blessed with a long duration of life. Bhavata, by your good self. Yat, whatever. Vinishitam, ascertain. Pumsam, for the people in general. Ekantata, absolutely, Shreya, ultimate good, tat that, na to us, shamsitum, to explain, arhasi, deserve. Translation. Please, therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you have ascertained to be the absolute and ultimate good for the people in general. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, worship of the Acharya is recommended. The Acharyas and Goswamis are always absorbed in thought of the well-being of the general public, especially their spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being is automatically followed by material well-being. The Acharyas therefore give direction being for people in general, forcing the incompetencies of the people in this age of Kali or the iron age of quarrel. The sages requested that Suta Goswami give a summary of all revealed scriptures because the people of this age are condemned in every respect. Foreseeing the incompetencies of the people in this age of Kali or the iron age of quarrel, the sages requested that Suta Goswami give a summary of all revealed scriptures because the people of this age are condemned in every respect. The sages therefore inquired of the absolute good, which is the ultimate good for the people. The condemned state of affairs of the people of this age is described as follows. The condemned state of affairs of the people of this age is described as follows. Text 10. Prayenal Payusha Sabhya Kalavasmin Yuge Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagyahi Upadruta. Synonyms. Prayena, almost always, Alpa, meager, Ayusha, duration of life, Sabhya, member of a learned society, Kalau, in this age of Kali, quarrel, Asmin, herein, Yuge, age, Jana, the public, Manda, lazy, Sumanda, Mataya, misguided, Man, unlucky, he, and above all, Upadruta, disturbed. Translation. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men almost always have short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Purport. The devotees of the Lord are always anxious for the spiritual improvement of the general public. When the sages of Naimisharanya analyze the state of affairs of the people in this age of Kali, they foresaw that men would live short lives. In Kali Yuga, the duration of life is shortened not so much because of insufficient food, but because of irregular habits. By keeping regular habits and eating simple food, any man can maintain his health. Overeating, over sense gratification, over dependence on others' mercy, and artificial standards of living sap the very vitality of human energy. Therefore, the duration of life is shortened. The people of this age are also very lazy, not only materially, but in the matter of self-realization. The human life is especially meant for self-realization. To say, man should come to know what he is, what the world is, and what the supreme truth is. Human life is a means by which the living entity can end all the miseries of the hard struggle for life in material existence, and by which he can return to Godhead, his eternal home. But due to a bad system of education, men have no desire for self-realization. Even if they come to know, guided teachers. In this age, men are victims not only of different political creeds and parties, but also of many different types of sense gratificatory diversions, such as cinema, sports, gambling, clubs, mundane libraries, bad associations, smoking, drinking, cheating, pilfering, bickerings, and so on. Their minds are always disturbed and full of anxieties due to so many different engagements. In this age, many unscrupulous men manufacture their own religious faiths, which are not based on any revealed scriptures. And very often, people who are addicted to sense gratification are attracted by such institutions. Consequently, in the name of religion, so many sinful acts are being carried on that the people in general have neither peace of mind nor health of body. The student brahmachari communities are no longer being maintained. Householders do not observe the rules and regulations of the grihastha ashrama. Consequently, the so-called vanaprasthas and sannyasis who come out of such grihastha ashramas are easily deviated from the rigid path. In the Kali Yuga, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with faithlessness. In the Kali Yuga, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with faithlessness. Men are no longer interested in spiritual values. Material sense gratification is now the standard of civilization. For the maintenance of such material civilizations, man has formed complex nations and communities. And there is a constant strain of hot and cold wars between these different groups. It has become very difficult, therefore, to raise the spiritual standard due to the present distorted values of human society. The sages of Naimisharanya are anxious to disentangle all fallen souls, and here they are seeking the remedy from Srila Suta Goswami. Text 11. Bhurini, bhuri karmani, shrotavyani vibhagasha, atasa sadotra yatsa mudritya manishaya, bruhi bhadraya bhutanam yenatma suprasidati. Synonyms. Bhurini, multifarious. Bhuri, many. Karmani, duties. Shrotavyani, to be learned. Vibhagasha, by divisions of subject matter. Atha, therefore. Sadho, O sage. Atra, herein. Yat, whatever. Saram, essence. Samudritya, by selection. Manishaya, to the best of your knowledge. Bruhi, please tell us. Bhadraya, for the good of. Bhutanam, the living beings. Ena, by which Atma, the self. Suprasidati, becomes fully satisfied. Translation. There are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them, there are many prescribed duties, which can be learned only after many years of study in the various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by which instruction their hearts may be fully satisfied. Purport. Atma or self is distinguished from matter and material elements. It is spiritual in constitution and thus it's never satisfied by any amount of material planning. All scriptures instructions are meant for the satisfaction of this self or Atma. There are many varieties of approaches which are recommended for different types of living beings in different times and at different places. Consequently, the numbers of revealed scriptures are innumerable. There are different methods and prescribed duties recommended in these various scriptures. Taking into consideration the fallen condition of the people in general in this age of Kali, the sages of Naimisharanya suggested that Sri Suta Goswami relate the essence of all such scriptures because in this age, it's not possible for the fallen souls to understand and undergo all the lessons of all these various scriptures in a Varna and Ashrama system. The Varna and Ashrama society was considered to be the best institution for lifting the human being to the spiritual platform, but due to Kali Yuga, it's not possible to execute the rules and regulations of these institutions, nor is it possible for the people in general to completely sever relations with their families as the Varnashrama institution prescribes. Atmosphere is surcharged with opposition. And considering this, one can see that spiritual emancipation for the common man in this age is very difficult. The reason the sages presented this matter to Sri Suta Goswami is explained in the following verses. Text 12. Suta janasi badram te bhagavan satvatam pati devakyam vasudevasya jato yasya chikirshaya. Synonyms: Suta, O Suta Goswami, Janasi, you know. Bhadram te, all blessings upon you. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Satvatam, of the pure devotees. Pati, the protector. Devakyam, in the womb of Devaki. Vasudevasya, by Vasudeva. Jata, born of Yasya, for the purpose of Chikishaya, executing. Translation: all blessings upon you, O Suta Goswami. You know for what purpose the personality of Godhead appeared in the womb of Devaki as the son of Vasudeva. Purport: Bhagavan means the Almighty God, who is the controller of all opulence, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. Bhagavan means the Almighty God, who is the controller of all opulence, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He is the protector of his pure devotees. Although God is equally disposed to everyone, he is especially inclined to his devotees. Sat means the absolute truth. And persons who are servitors of the absolute truth are called Sattvatas. And the personality of Godhead who protects such pure devotees is known as the protector of the Sattvatas. Bhadram te, or blessings upon you, indicates the sage's anxiety to know the absolute truth from the speaker. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared to Devaki, the wife of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the symbol of the transcendental position wherein the appearance of the Supreme Lord takes place. Text 13. Tanna Shushru Shamananam Arasyanganu Varnitam Yasyavataro Bhutanam Kshemaya Cha Bhavaya Cha. Synonyms: that those na unto us, Shushru Shamananam, those who are Arhasi ought to do it. Anga, O Suta Goswami, Anuvarnitum, to explain by following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. Yasya, whose avatara, incarnation, Bhutanam, of the living beings, Kshemaya, for good, Cha, and Bhavaya, upliftment, Cha, and translation. O Suta Goswami, we are eager to learn about the personality of Godhead and his incarnations. Please explain to us those teachings imparted by previous masters, acharyas, for one is uplifted both by speaking and by hearing them. Purport: the conditions for hearing the transcendental message of the absolute truth are set forth herein. The first condition is that the audience must be very sincere and eager to hear, and the speaker must be in the line of disciplic succession from the recognized acharya. The transcendental message of the absolute is not understandable by those who are materially absorbed. Under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, one becomes gradually purified. Therefore, one must be in the chain of disciplic succession and learn the spiritual art of submissive hearing. In the case of Suta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya, all these conditions because Srila Suta Goswami is in the line of Srila Vyasadeva, and sages of Naimisharanya are all sincere souls who are anxious to learn the truth. Thus, the transcendental topics of Lord Sri Krishna's superhuman activities, his incarnation, his birth, appearance or disappearance, his forms, his names, and so on, are all easily understandable because all requirements are fulfilled. Such discourses help men on the path of spiritual realization. Text 14. Apanna samsritim ghoram yannama vivasho grinan tataha sadyo vimuchyeta yad vivedi swayam bhayam. Synonyms: apanna, being entangled, samsritim, in the hurdle of birth and death, ghoram, too complicated, yat, what, nama, the absolute name, vivasha, unconsciously, grinan, chanting, tataha, from that, sadhya, at once, vimuchyeta, gets freedom, yat, that which, bibheti, fear, swayam, personally, bhayam, fear itself. Translation: living beings who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately. unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by the fear personified. Purport. Vasudeva or Lord Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the supreme controller of everything. There's no one in creation who's not afraid of the rage of the Almighty. There's no one in creation who's not afraid of the rage of the Almighty. Great asuras like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others who were very powerful living entities were all killed by the personality of Godhead. And the Almighty Vasudeva has empowered his name with the powers of his personal self. Everything is related to him, and everything has its identity, in him. It is stated herein that the name of Krishna is feared even by fear personified. This indicates that the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. Therefore, the name of Krishna is as powerful as Lord Krishna himself. There's no difference at all. Anyone, therefore, can take advantage of the holy names of Lord Sri Krishna, even in the midst of the greatest dangers. The transcendental name of Krishna, even though uttered unconsciously or by force of circumstances, can help one obtain freedom from the hurdle of birth and death. Text 15. The samshraya suta munaya prashamayana sadhya punanti upasprishta swadhuni aponu sevaya. Synonyms: yat, whose, pada, lotus feet, samshraya, those who have taken shelter of, Suta, O Suta Goswami, Munaya, great sages, Prashamayana, absorbed in devotion to the Supreme, Sadhya, at once, Punanti, sanctify, Upasprishta, simply by association, Svardhuni, of the sacred Ganges, Apa, water, Anusevaya, bringing into use. Translation: O Suta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Purport: pure devotees of the Lord are more powerful than the waters of the sacred river Ganges. Pure devotees of the Lord are more powerful than the waters of the sacred river Ganges. One can derive spiritual benefit out of prolonged use of the Ganges water, but one can be sanctified at once by the mercy of a pure devotee. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that any person, regardless of birth as Sudra, Shudra, woman or merchant, can take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and by so doing can return to Godhead. To take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord means to take shelter of the pure devotees. The pure devotees whose only business is serving are honored by the names Prabhupada and Vishnupada, which indicates such devotees to be representatives of the lotus feet of the Lord. Anyone, therefore, who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee by accepting the pure devotee as a spiritual master can be at once purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord because they are engaged in the most confidential service of the Lord, for they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Such pure devotees are better known as wise lords according to revealed scriptures. The sincere disciple of the pure devotee considers the spiritual master equal to the Lord, but always considers himself to be a humble servant of the Lord. This is the pure devotional path. Kova bhagavatastasya punya shlokedya karmana shuddhi kamo na shrunuyad yashakali malapaham. Synonyms: kaha, va, rather, bhagavata, of the Lord, tasya, his punya, virtuous, shloka idya, worshipable by prayers, karmana, deeds, shuddhi kama, desiring deliverance from all sins, not, shrunuyat, thus here, yashaha, glories, kali, of the sage of quarrel, mala apaham, the agent for sanctification. Translation: who is there desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of quarrel, who is not willing to hear the virtuous glories of the Lord? Purport: The age of Kali is the most condemned age, but due to its quarrelsome features. Kali Yuga is so saturated with vicious habits that there's a great fight at the slightest misunderstanding. Those who are engaged in the pure devotional service of the Lord, who are without any desire for self-aggrandizement, and who are freed from the effects of fruitive actions and dry philosophical speculations, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of this complicated age. The leaders of the people are very much anxious to live in peace and friendship. The leaders are very much anxious to live in peace and friendship, but they have no information of the simple method of hearing the glories of the Lord. On the contrary, such leaders are opposed to the propagation of the glories of the Lord. In other words, the foolish leaders want to completely deny the existence of the Lord. In the name of secular state, such leaders are enacting various plans every year. But by the insurmountable intricacies of the material nature of the Lord, all these plans for progress are being constantly frustrated. They have no eyes to see that their attempts at peace and friendship are failing. But here is the hint to get over the hurdle. If we want actual peace, we must open the road to understanding of the Supreme Lord Krishna and glorify him for his virtuous activities as they are depicted in the pages of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Text 17. Tasya karmani udarani parigitani suribhi duhina shraddhadananam leelaya dadhakta kala. Synonyms: karmani, transcendental acts; udarani, magnanimous; parigitani, broadcast; suribhi, by the great souls; bruhi, please speak; naha, unto us; shraddhadhananam, ready to receive with respect; leelaya, past tense; dadatha, advented; kala, incarnations. Translation: his transcendental acts are magnificent and gracious, and great learned sages like Narada sing of them. Please, therefore, speak to us who are eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. Purport. The personality of Godhead is never inactive as some less intelligent persons suggest. His works are magnificent and magnanimous. His creations, both material and spiritual, are all wonderful and contain all variegatedness. They are described nicely by such liberated souls as Srila, Narada, Vyasa, Valmiki, Devala, Asita, Madhva, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Sridhara, Vishwanatha, Baladeva, Bhakti Vinoda, Siddhanta Saraswati, and many other learned and self-realized souls. These creations, both material and spiritual, are full of opulence, beauty, and knowledge. But the spirit is more magnificent due to its being full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. The material creations are manifested for some time as perverted shadows of the spiritual kingdom and can be likened to cinemas. They attract people of less intelligent caliber who are attracted by false things. Such foolish men have no information of the reality, and they take it for granted that the false material manifestation is the all and all. But more intelligent men, guided by sages like Vyasa and Narada, know that the eternal kingdom of God is more delightful, larger, and eternally full of bliss and knowledge. Those who are not conversant with the activities of the Lord and his transcendental realm, or sometimes favored by the Lord in his adventures as incarnations, wherein he displays the eternal bliss of his association in the transcendental realm. By such activities, he attracts the conditioned souls of the material world. Some of these conditioned souls are engaged in the false enjoyment of material sense, simply negating the real life in the spiritual world. These less intelligent persons are known as karmis, or fruity workers, and gyanis are dry mental speculators. But above these two classes of men is the transcendentalist known as Sattvata, or the devotee, who's busy neither with rampant material activity nor with material speculation. He is engaged in the positive service of the Lord, and thereby he derives the highest spiritual benefit unknown to the karmis and jnanis. As the supreme controller of both the material and spiritual worlds, the Lord has different incarnations of unlimited categories. Incarnations like Brahma, Rudra, Manu, Prithu, and Vyasa are his material qualitative incarnations. But his incarnations like Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and Manu and Vamana, Varaha, and Vamana are his transcendental incarnations. Lord Shri Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations. Lord Shri Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations, for the cause of all causes. Synonyms. Therefore, Akhyahi describe Hare of the Lord, Dhima, O sagacious one, Avatara incarnations, Katha, narratives, Shubha, auspicious Leela adventures, Vidavamata, perform, Svairam, pastimes, Ishwarasya, of the supreme controller, Atma personal, Maya energies. Translation. O wise Sutta, please narrate. O wise Sutta, please narrate to us the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme God's multi-incarnations. Such auspicious adventures and past Supreme Controller are performed by his internal powers. Purport. For the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material worlds, the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead himself, appears in many thousands of forms of incarnations. For the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material worlds, the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead himself, appears in many thousands of forms of incarnations, and the specific adventures found in those transcendental forms are all auspicious. But both those who are present during such activities and those who hear the transcendental narrations of such activities are benefited. Text 19. Vayam tuna vitrupyama uttama shloka vikrame yachrinvatam rasagyanam swadu swadu pade pade. Synonyms. Vayam, we, too, but, not, vitrupyama, shall be at rest, uttama shloka, the personality of Godhead who is glorified by transcendental prayers, vikrame, adventures, yat, which, shrinvatam, by continuous hearing, rasa, humor, jnana, conversant with, swadu, relishing, swadu, palatable, pade pade, at every step. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with him relish hearing of his pastimes at every moment. Purport. There is a great difference between mundane stories, fiction, or history and the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The histories of the whole universe contain references to the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas are histories of bygone ages, recorded in connection with the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord, and therefore remain fresh even after repeated readings. For example, anyone may read Bhagavad Gita or the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam repeatedly throughout his whole life and yet find in them new light of information. Mundane news is static, whereas transcendental news is dynamic. The spirit is dynamic and matter is static. Those who have developed a taste for understanding the transcendental subject matter are never tired of hearing such narrations. One is quickly situated by mundane activities, but one is quickly satiated by mundane activities, but no one is satiated by transcendental or devotional activities. Uttama Shloka indicates that literature which is not meant for Uttama Shloka indicates that literature which is not meant for nations. Mundane literature is in the mode of darkness of ignorance, whereas transcendental literature is quite different. Transcendental literature is above the mode of darkness and its light becomes more luminous with progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. The so-called liberated persons are never satisfied by the repetition of the word and aham. Transcendental literature is above the mode of darkness and its light becomes more luminous with progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. The so-called liberated persons are satisfied by the repetition of the words aham brahmasmi. Such artificial realization of Brahman becomes hackneyed, and so to relish real pleasure, they turn to the narrations of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Those who are not so fortunate turn to altruism and worldly philanthropy. This means the Mayavada philosophy is mundane, whereas the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam is transcendental. Text 20. Kritavan kila karmani saharamena keshava atimatyani bhagavan gura kapata manusha. Synonyms. Kritavan, done by, kila what, karmani, acts, saha, along with, ramena, Balarama, Keshavas, the Sri Krishna, Atimatyani, superhuman, Bhagavan, like the personality of Godhead, Gudha, masters, Kapat. Keshava, Sri Krishna, superhuman, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Gudha, masters, Kapata, apparently, Manusha, human being. Translation. Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, along with Balarama, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman activities. Translation. Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, along with Balarama, played like a human being, and so must he perform many superhuman acts. Purport. The doctrines of anthropomorphism and zoomorphism are never applicable to Shri Krishna or the personality of Godhead. The theory that a man becomes God by dint of penance and austerities is very much rampant nowadays, especially in India. Since Lord Rama, Lord Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were detected by the sages and saints to be the personality of Godhead, as indicated in revealed scriptures, many unscrupulous men have created their own incarnations. This process of concocting an incarnation of God has become an ordinary business, especially in Bengal. Any popular person of mystic powers will display some feat of jugglery and easily become an incarnation of Godhead by popular oath. Lord Shri Krishna was not at all that type of incarnation. He was actually the personality of God from the very beginning of his appearance. He appeared before his so-called mother as four-armed Vishnu. Then at the request of the mother, he became like a human child and at once left her for another Gokula, where he was accepted as the son of Nanda Maharaja and Yashoda Mata. Similarly, Sri Baladeva, the counterpart of Lord Shri Krishna, was also considered a human child born of another wife of Sri Vasudeva. Similarly, Sri Baladeva, the counterpart of Lord Shri Krishna, was considered a human child born of another wife of Sri Vasudeva. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that his birth and deeds are transcendental and that anyone who is so fortunate as to know the transcendental nature of his birth and deeds will at once become liberated and eligible to return to the kingdom of God. In addition, the transcendental nature of the Lord is described in 9 cantos. And in the 10th canto, his specific pastimes are taken up. All this it's important to note here that, however, the Lord exhibited his divinity even from the lap of his mother, that his deeds are very superhuman. He lifted Govardhana Hill at the age of 7, and that all these are definitely proving him to be actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet, due to his mystic covering, he was always accepted as an ordinary child as an ordinary human child by his so-called father and mother. And whenever some Herculean task was performed by him, the father and Naimisharanya describe him as apparently the father and mother took it otherwise. Whenever some Herculean task was performed by him, the father and mother took it otherwise, and they remained satisfied with unflinching parental love for their son. As such, the sages of Naimisharanya describe him as apparently resembling a human being, but actually he is the Supreme Personality. Text 21. Kalimagatam Agnaya Kshetresmin Vaishnave Vayam Ashina Dirgat Satrena Kathayam Sakshana Hare. Synonyms. Kalim, the age of Kali, iron age of quarrel. Agatam, having arrived. Agnaya, knowing this. Kshetre, in this tract of land. Asmin, in the translation, knowing well that the age of Kali has already begun, we are assembled here in this holy place to hear at great length the transcendental message of Godhead and in this way perform sacrifice. Purport. The age of Kali is not, this age of Kali is not at all realization, as was Satya Yuga, the golden age, or Treta or Dwapar Yugas, the silver and copper ages. For self-realization, the people in Satya Yuga living a lifetime of 100,000 years were able to perform prolonged meditation. And in Treta Yuga, when the duration of life was 10,000 years, self-realization was And in the Dwapar Yuga, when the duration of life was 1000 years, self-realization was attained by worship of the Lord. But in the Kali Yuga, the maximum duration of life being 100 years only, and that combined with various difficulties, the recommended process of self-realization is that of hearing and chanting of the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord. The sages of Naimisharanya, this process in a place meant specifically for the devotees of the Lord. They prepared themselves to hear the pastimes of the Lord over a period of 1000 years. By the example of these sages, one should learn that regular hearing and recitation of the Bhagavatam is the only way for self-realization. Other attempts are simply a waste of time, for they do not give any tangible results. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached this system of Bhagavata Dharma, and he recommended that all those who are born in India should take the responsibility of broadcasting the messages of Lord Sri Krishna, primarily the message of Bhagavad Gita. And when one is well established in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, he can take up the study of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam for further enlightenment in self-realization. Purport. The age of Kali is very dangerous for the human being. Human life is simply meant for self-realization, but due to this dangerous age, men have completely forgotten the aim of life. In this age, the lifespan will gradually decrease. People will gradually lose their memory, finer sentiments, strength, and better qualities. A list of the anomalies for this age is given in the 12th canto of this work. And so this age is very difficult for those who want to utilize this life for self-realization. The people are so busy with sense gratification that they completely forget about self-realization. Out of madness, they frankly say that there is no need for self-realization because they do not realize that this brief life is but a moment on a great journey towards self-realization. The whole system of education is geared to sense gratification, and if a learned man thinks it And if a learned man thinks it's over, he sees that the children of this age are being intentionally sent to slaughterhouses of so-called education. Learned men, therefore, must be cautious of this. If they at all want to cross over the dangerous oceans of Kali, they must follow the footsteps of the sages of Naimisharanya and accept Sri Suta Goswami as or his bona fide representative as the captain of the ship. The ship is the message of Lord Krishna in the shape of Bhagavad Gita or the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Text 23. Bruhi Yogeshwara Pare Krishna Brahmanye Dharma Varmani Swam Kashtam Adhunopete Dharmakam Charanam Gata. Bruhi, please tell Yogeshwara, the Lord of all mystic powers, Krishna, Lord Krishna, Brahmanye, the absolute truth, Dharma, religion, Varmani, protect. Bruhi Yogeshware Krishne, Brahmanye, Dharma Varmani, Swamasta Kashtam Adunopete, Dharmakam Sharanam Gata. Bruhi, synonyms, Bruhi, please tell Yoga Ishware, the Lord of all mystic powers, Krishna, Lord Krishna, Brahmanya, the absolute truth, Dharma, religious, Varmani, protector. Translation. Since Sri Krishna, the absolute truth, the master of all mystic powers, has departed for his own abode, please tell us to whom the religious principles have now gone for shelter. Purport. Essentially, religion is the prescribed codes enunciated by the personality of Godhead himself. Whenever there's gross misuse or neglect of the principles of religion, the Supreme Lord appears himself to restore religious principles. This is stated in Bhagavad Gita. Here, the sages of Naimisharanya are inquiring about these principles. The reply, this is stated in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in Bhagavad Gita. Here, the sages of Naimisharanya are inquiring about these principles. The reply to this question is given later. The Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the transcendental sound representation of the personality of Godhead, and thus it is the full representation of transcendental knowledge principles.